What's happening? Thanks for joining me on a Friday. As always, it is much appreciated. Hopefully you have your weekend lined up. Of course, we've got the Bruins and the Celtics playoffs starting this weekend, which should be very, very interesting. We'll get into that much later. We'll also get to the Elliot Wolf press conference from yesterday, as of course we had Jeff Howe on the show, so we did not get to the Wolf press conference yesterday. We'll get to that today. But we start with the latest Patriots draft gossip. That's right. The latest gossip surrounding the Patriots and this draft. We begin with Burt Breer, who was on Boston Sports Tonight and talked about the idea of trades, possible trades for the Patriots and what they might be looking at. Here's what he said. The two teams that would have a real interest in Drake May would be Minnesota and the Giants. I don't think the Patriots have a huge intention to trade the pick. Both those teams have something tantalizing. Part of the Minnesota talk has been, will you send a pick back to Minnesota? Over the next week, are they going to get more aggressive? Some pressure. There's some pressure from ownership to get a quarterback there. So again, that was Burt Breer on Boston Sports Tonight a couple nights ago. Are teams already starting to get more aggressive? That's my question. Kimberly Martin of ESPN tweeted out that sources confirmed to her that Jaden Daniels will meet with the Vikings, who have been actively trying to move up in round one to get a top-tier quarterback. Martin also said on TV that the Vikings are trying to get a deal done before the draft. More Burt Breer talking about Michael Penix and why Michael Penix decided to visit Gillette, or the Patriots decided to have him visit. Breer said that this was a late ad because the Patriots are considering a trade down. So when you think about this, you've got to believe that this was the Patriots getting their ducks in a row with Michael Penix and company, correct? That's what you've got to believe. Ownership matters. Let's start there. Ownership matters. John Mara in New York, the Giants, he has given his front office the green light to make a move. He has told the Giants front office that they can do what they have to do to make sure they have the right quarterback on that roster. Ziggy Wolf, who is the Minnesota Vikings owner, seems to be a little bit desperate in Minnesota. Kirk Cousins goes down to Atlanta. Minnesota needs a quarterback. So how desperate does this Vikings ownership end up being as they get closer and closer to the draft, wondering, are we going to have that answer? Are we going to have that guy who we need to be that guy at the most pivotal position in all of sport? The Patriots, they've got some leverage, folks. They've got leverage. You've got a lot of teams, or at least multiple teams, who, look at this and they say to themselves, hey, we like Drake May, or we love Drake May. There are teams that will say we love J.J. McCarthy. So when you look at the leverage, the Patriots know that May and McCarthy are sexy to a number of teams in this draft. They're sitting there at 3. If it goes Caleb Williams and then Jaden Daniels, you'll have those teams trying to maneuver themselves up to that 3 spot. And as we always say, as the clock ticks and the draft continues to move on and on and on, there's more pressure inherently on every team to make that decision, to say to themselves, we are going to do what we've got to do. Let me make a quick change here, because I just realized that my banner is the wrong banner. It's the first time I've ever done this. Let's see if this looks better. There it is. That looks a lot better. I had Jeff Howe as the guest, still up there. A little foggy on a Friday. But you've got these teams, they're sitting there and the clock is ticking in the pressure of the clock. They need to make a move. They want to make a move. They're getting closer and closer to decision-making time. Patriots take advantage of that. The Patriots also understand that they don't need to trade. It's not a necessity, right? They don't have to trade that number 3 pick. They can wait, they can sit, and they can pick. So they don't necessarily feel the urgency to move on from that pick. So that also helps them because they don't seem desperate. All right, before we continue to move on, don't forget to give us that like. Don't forget to subscribe. It's always good to get that support from all of you with those thumbs up. Try to beat that YouTube algorithm. So give us those thumbs up. Give us those subscriptions. Trying to hit 3,500 subscriptions. That is the next goal. We just surpassed 3,000, which was great. So don't forget, give us that like and subscribe. Listening on Spotify, Apple Pods. Don't forget to rate and review. Patreon page. We're going to start hammering the NFL draft next week, big time before Thursday night. So patreon.com/Nick Cattle, Cattles, $5 a month. Connor Hughes, he posted this the other day. I don't think, this is from Joe Shane, which is the Giants GM, says, I don't think anyone is willing to move right now regarding the top 3 picks. But he adds that people are listening. Now, of course, this is all about the Patriots, right? This has to be about the Patriots. This can't be about anybody else. We know that Chicago's picking Caleb Williams number 1. And we're pretty confident that Washington is going to stick and pick at 2. So when Joe Shane, the GM of the New York Giants, says, I don't think anyone is willing to move right now, but people are listening, that has to be directed towards the Patriots. It has to. They're the team that everybody's talking about. They're the team that might deal out of 3. Adam Peters, GM of the Commanders, yesterday said, we're fine sitting at 2. We're good. We're perfect. So the translation is, if Joe Shane, the Giants GM, doesn't believe the Patriots are willing to, talk just yet, or they're at least listening, they're not willing to move, that tells me that Elliot Wolf is driving that price up for the number 3 pick, which I think is smart business. Now, if we're talking to the Giants obviously have a top 6 pick. They sit there at 6. If you're going to make a trade with them, if you're the Patriots, you have to understand you're going to get less in return, right? You're going to get less in return if you're the Patriots because you're only moving down 3 spots. If you're moving down to 11 with Minnesota, you're going to get much more bounty for that number 3 pick. So you have to look at the deals. If you're open to trading, and I would imagine the Patriots are open to trading as long as they get that absolute bomb of an offer, you have to look at the offers and figure out, is the Giants offer better because I'm only going down to 6? Or is the Vikings offer better because, yes, I got to go down to 11, but I'm getting so much more. I'm getting so much more from the Vikings in totality than I get from the Giants. So how big of a deal is it to you if you're at 6 or 11? To me, it's a big deal. I want one of those blue chip offensive prospects. I would much rather be at 6 than 11 if I'm moving back. So all of this plays hand in hand with everything else that's going on. Burt Breer, again, on Boston Sports Tonight the other night, said that, part of the Minnesota talk has been, will you send a pick back to Minnesota? That's a big detail. Are the Patriots willing to give up an extra pick on top of swapping 3 to 11 to get whatever Minnesota is offering? I would be hesitant. I'm only going to be looking, if you want to pick from me, if you're Minnesota and you want to pick from me, I'm only going to give you maybe a 4th round pick or later in 2025. I'm not sprinkling a lot on top of the 3 pick. I'm allowing you to move from 11 to 3. That's a huge jump. So I'm not just going to give that away and add an extra pick to it. I'm not interested in that kind of an idea. Burt Breer, again, on Boston Sports Tonight the other night, said that on a possible Patriots deal, if it's the Giants, you're in a good position to get J.J. McCarthy. Breer on the Pats being split on May and McCarthy says there's disagreement across the league on those 2 quarterbacks. There's not a huge consensus across the league, and that's reflective in the draft room. It's a ceiling/floor argument. Chris Gasper of the Globe, he wrote, at this point, McCarthy would be an upset selection at number 3, but he can't be ruled out. Jeff Howe with us yesterday said something similar. So all of a sudden, over the past few days, the J.J. McCarthy smoke is starting to slow down regarding him and the Patriots. All of a sudden, we have multiple people saying, you know what? It might not be McCarthy. The Patriots like this guy more, like that guy more. That's interesting to me. that as we get closer to the draft, the McCarthy noise is quieting down more and more. Is J.J. McCarthy plan B? Could be. The Patriots could be looking at this as J.J. McCarthy plus what versus Drake May or Daniels. What I mean by that is if you can draft J.J. McCarthy, say you drop down to 6 and you draft McCarthy at 6, what did New York give you? Because then you're looking at J.J. McCarthy at 6 plus whatever you got from the Giants versus Drake May or Jaden Daniels at 3. That's the reality. That's what you're looking at. So it's interesting, how much, if you're Elliot Wolf, how much do you value McCarthy? Because do you believe that McCarthy in an extra second-round pick and maybe something next year is worth more than just drafting Drake May or Daniels and sticking and picking at 3? We don't know how they feel over there. This could also be a coaches versus scouts / front office thing, right? The coaches might love one quarterback. The front office, the scouts might love another quarterback. And we've talked about the difficulty of finding a true consensus within this franchise when you're talking about the quarterback position. Have they been able to find that consensus? Have they been able to look at Drake May, all talk about him, and come to the finality that he's the guy? Or is there still this split? Was there a split to begin with? Are there some voices saying McCarthy's the guy and other voices are saying that May is the guy or Daniels is the guy? Don't know. A lot of people have been in that room. And I think what this tells us is teams are now, and we talked about this a little bit earlier in the week, teams are now getting serious about their draft boards. Like, this is the point. I mean, we are 6 days away from night 1 of the draft. Teams are getting serious about their boards. There's no doubt about that. They have a much more clear idea as to who they want. Greg Bedard said on the podcast that I do with him yesterday, Greg said that, from what he understands, the Patriots know what they're going to do at 3, depending on what the Commanders do at 2. So Greg's hearing that they know. He doesn't know who that guy is or what they want, what their plan A is. But at this point, they know. Okay, if Washington drafts Jaden Daniels, this is what we're going to do. If they draft May, this is what we're going to do. If they draft McCarthy and Daniels and May are sitting there in front of us, this is the guy that we would pick. Now, Burt Breer on NBC Sports Boston talking about that 3rd pick, he said, I feel like Drake May is going to be the 3rd pick. Whether it's the Patriots, Vikings, or Giants taking him, if the Patriots can't reach a consensus on May, you trade down and try to trade back up for McCarthy, or you trade down and take Penix at 11. If for some reason McCarthy or May goes to Washington, well, that simplifies things. Then the Patriots take Jaden Daniels at number 3. I'm a strong believer in if you love the guy, don't play around. If there is a quarterback in this draft that Eliot Wolf and company truly love, don't screw around. Don't try to move down and then back up. Don't try to move down and get the guy. If you love him, pick him. Right? If it's Drake May or Jaden Daniels, if you love that guy, you pick him. Now, yes, you can try to manipulate the board, but there's so much risk with that. I would rather just stick and pick. If you truly love him, if you don't have questions about his future, if you think he could be the franchise quarterback for you, then you pick the guy. Breer also, if you listen to what Breer said, his read on the Patriots rankings, off of what Burt said, it would lead you to believe that the Patriots rank the quarterbacks like this: Jaden Daniels, Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix. If you go off of what Burt said. So Daniels, May, J.J., Penix. Is that the Patriots board at the quarterback position? The idea of drafting Michael Penix at number 11 brings us back to the horizontal board. This was something we discussed earlier in the week. The horizontal board is, all right, you have Michael Penix. Let's say Michael Penix is your 5th-rated quarterback, because if you include Caleb Williams. If you don't, then you look at Penix as your 4th-rated quarterback. Well, what is Penix, right? What is Penix versus wide receiver? If you have Penix as your fourth quarterback or fifth quarterback, do you like him at 11 better than maybe the second or third offensive tackle? That's when the horizontal board plays a huge role. So all of this stuff is fascinating. Breer is telling us that quarterback is the only stick and pick scenario. By what he said on NBC Sports Boston, if the Patriots stay at 3, they're picking a quarterback, and I think that's the right decision. I've said that from day one. I know some people, seems like less people feel this way, that Marvin Harrison Jr. could be that guy at 3, maybe even Joe Alt. If you stick at 3, then you pick the quarterback. I believe that. If you're looking to add an offensive tackle or a wide receiver, that's when I start to seriously entertain trading down. And I'm not holding that pick hostage as much if I'm not concerned with the quarterback position at 3. So if you stay at 3, you stick and pick and you pick that quarterback. If you're not going to pick a quarterback at 3, then move down. Get extra draft capital. That's what I think they should be doing. All right, got some super chats lined up. Before I get to those, want to remind you, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're watching, give us that thumbs up on YouTube. All the support matters. Trying to expand this brand. Give us that thumbs up. Smack that algorithm in the face. Also, subscribe to the channel. Trying to get to 3,500 subscribers. It's a massive leap. We just hit 3,000 this week. Next goal is 3,500. We have a gigantic week of content next week for the draft. On Thursday, we're doing multiple podcasts for night 1. We will do our 11 a.m. podcast. We will do a preview podcast. We will do a reactionary podcast when the pick is in, loaded with content. If you want draft talk on draft day, draft night, you want to like this channel, you want to subscribe to this channel, because we are going to hit it hard next week. And leading into the draft, we are going to hit draft talk even harder than we have up to this point. The Nick Cattle Show is brought to you by Warzone Paintball and Airsoft. Warzone has 9 maps on 30-plus acres of land. They've got paintball, they've got airsoft, they've got kid versions of paintball and airsoft, something for every age group starting at 6+. All you have to do is show up with jeans, good shoes, a long sleeve shirt. They will take care of the rest. Low-key, casual. If you're new to paintball or airsoft, don't worry about it. They'll take care of you. The rules are designed to protect new players, which is awesome. So check out Warzone Paintball and Airsoft. It's in North Kingston, Rhode Island. Give them a call at 401-228-6366, 401-228-6366. Tell them the Nick Cattle Show sent you. Thanks to Warzone Paintball and Airsoft for sponsoring this podcast. Got a couple of super chats I want to get to, and then we will roll right into Elliot Wolf's press conference from yesterday and what I took from that. This is something that we've never done before. So I actually had somebody send me a notification on Twitter today, and it is a listener that always listens, King Cato 21, and he threw this in to ask me a $5 super chat, said, Nick, by if some chance the Patriots are being honest about taking any of the top 6 quarterbacks at 3, how concerned would you be about the staff? So the question is, if the Patriots truly, because one of the things that Eliot Wolf said yesterday was that he could see more than just Daniels, May, and McCarthy going at 3, and that he would be okay with it. How would I feel if that's the truth? I wouldn't feel very good. Because if you believe there are 6 quarterbacks that are worthy of being picked at number 3, I don't think you're valuing the number 3 pick nearly enough. Nearly enough. To me, it's Daniels or May. To me. Those are the 2 quarterbacks outside of Caleb Williams, who's going 1. Drake May and Jaden Daniels are the only ones that you could talk me into at 3. And I would say the more I watch things, the more I read things, the more I think about this, I'm leaning even stronger towards May today than I am Daniels. I've been leaning May. I'm leaning even stronger. But I would still take Daniels at 3. McCarthy, no thank you. Penix, no thank you. Bo Nix, no way in hell. So if they really, truly feel that way, I wouldn't feel great about it. All right, couple of super chats here. Justin TF Patriot, $1.99. Thank you for the super chat, Justin. May throwing to A.J. Brown, yes, please. Yeah, there was a roar about A.J. Brown yesterday with all the social media stuff. I saw Burt Breer last night on Early Edition say he made some calls. Teams have been calling on A.J. Brown, but the Eagles have turned down those overtures. Burt also said that the Patriots were one of those teams that called Philly about Brown. Even if they don't get Brown, here's what I'll say. I'm very happy that the Patriots are making those calls. I'm happy that they went after Calvin Ridley. I'm happy that they're making the phone calls for guys like A.J. Brown. If they're calling on Brown, you can best believe they're calling on Ayuk, they're calling on T. Higgins, they're calling on all of these receivers who might be available. And so I don't think that's something that we would hear with the prior regime, right? We never heard the prior regime. We never heard Bill Belichick being involved with the tippity top of the wide receiver market and making those kinds of phone calls. So the fact the Patriots are making those calls tells me they understand what they need. They understand they need a true legit alpha wide receiver one. Is it going to be Brown? We'll see. You know, the Eagles might be turning down offers right now, but then you get into the draft and the draft falls a certain way. Maybe the Eagles land a wide receiver. Maybe the Eagles look at who's available at 34 and they say, you know what? We didn't think that guy would be there at 34. Now we're going to entertain trading A.J. Brown for that guy. So you make the call and you at least set things up to pull the trigger if the opportunity is there. Charlie jumps in, regular supporter of the program, also a Patreon member. Patreon's going to be bomb next week. Mailbag drops later today. Next week, bonus podcasts about the draft, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, exclusively on the Patreon page. $5 a month, $1.25 a week. Patreon.com/Nick Cattles, Cattles. Read it up right around there. How much are we looking ahead to next year's free agent pool and next year's draft class? Does that impact what we do this year at all? I think it plays a role, but you can't get too far ahead because how many people would have had Jaden Daniels being drafted in the top 5 this year if this was last year? Not many. Daniels was seen really as like a 3rd round, 4th round guy before this last college football season. So I think you do look at it, Charlie. I think you look at the free agency board. You look at the draft. You've been working on those guys already that will be drafted next year for a year or two. The process starts early. So are you less inclined to gamble big time on a certain position if you think that position is going to be flush with opportunity next year between free agency and the draft? You might not be willing to go as overboard if you believe that, but you can't take everything for granted. And we mentioned this with the wide receiver class, right? Like next year's wide receiver class looks like a banger. But if these guys start signing contracts, not so much. Devontae Smith, he's done. So he's not going to be available next offseason. Jalen Waddle is another guy. Is Waddle going to get his deal done with Miami? Or will they look at Tyreek Hill and say, we paid too much for him already, we're not going to be able to pay both of them, and they deal Waddle. But if they deal Waddle, it's more likely to happen next year. CeeDee Lamb is another guy who's holding out, right? He's holding out down in Dallas. Does CeeDee Lamb hold out? And all of a sudden, the Cowboys say, thanks, but no thanks. We got to make a deal here. So it does play a role, but you can't take it for granted. If guys are available right now that you love, that you want, that will help this team, then you make those deals. You sign those players. You draft those guys. Appreciate the super chat, Charlie, as always. All right, let's get into Elliot Wolf. We will get into the Celtics and Bruins quick playoff previews for you. That's going to be later on in this podcast. But let's get to Elliot Wolf. We did not have the chance to discuss what Wolf said during that press conference yesterday because we had Jeff Howe on the show. Hopefully all of you enjoyed that interview with Jeff. Always great to have him on the program. Next week we are scheduled to have somebody on this podcast to talk draft, to talk prospects. So that'll be fun too. So let's get to Wolf. Before we get to what he said, couple of things. Number one, Elliot Wolf is not in the business of being honest to you or me, especially 1 week before the draft. Wolf has a responsibility to the program, not this program, the Patriots program. And that responsibility is to position himself to be in the best possible spot when certain things arrive, when the third pick arrives, when teams call, all of those things, right? So Elliot Wolf is not in the business of telling us the truth. If you're watching that press conference yesterday, taking everything that Elliot Wolf said to the bank, you're being naive. We have to understand that. Number two, speaking of understanding, Wolf understands that everyone else in the league is watching and listening. Every other GM is watching Wolf as far as what he's going to say, how he's going to say it, and what it truly means. He understands that. So there are certain messages that he's sending. He's sending certain messages to the fans at times. He's sending messages to the current roster at times. He's sending messages to other GMs and owners. That's what he's doing yesterday. He's blurring the lines because he's trying to get his team and himself in a better position to make the most impactful moves that he can make. So we have to understand that. With all of that said, let's get to some of these comments. As far as being a decision maker versus a consensus, Wolf said, if I'm the only person that wants a player and nobody else wants a player, I'm not crazy. We're going to try to do what's right. And to me, that was a message to a lot of different people, to fans, to scouts in the building, that I am not going to go on my own. I am going to make the final decision, but I am not going to overrule everybody in the room. And there are stories, whether you want to believe them or not is up to you, but there are stories that Bill Belichick, when he was the guy, he would overrule everybody. There's the famous N'Keal Harry story, when a bunch of people in the building wanted A.J. Brown, and Bill Belichick, because of his relationship with the people at Arizona State, had certain conversations, and he drafted N'Keal Harry at 32. So I thought Wolf saying that yesterday was a message to his staff. I am not going to go this alone. I'm not going to draft a guy just because I love him. I'm not going to draft the guy if there are a number of different voices telling me that's not the guy. I'm going to listen. I'm going to take that information in. I'm not crazy. I'm not a one-man band like I am with this podcast. About establishing a consensus, Wolf said getting a consensus helps. Among the real true decision makers, it is. So he later mentioned it. We've been talking about who's going to be in that room when these picks are made. Like, who has the final say is Eliot Wolf. But who is in that small circle of trust? And Wolf gave us some names yesterday. Wolf said Mayo, which is obvious. We wondered if Matt Groh would be around. He mentioned Matt Groh. And he said the coordinators. Now, no mention of the Crafts, could have been by design. No mention of Ben McAdoo. But it's interesting, he said if it's an offensive player that we're thinking of picking, if we're leaning towards a certain offensive player, then we'll bring in the offensive coordinator to have that conversation about that guy. If it's a defensive player, we'll do the same thing with the DC. So what's fascinating to me is if you've got Alex Van Pelt and Gerard Mayo in the room, Alex Van Pelt loves this certain offensive player that's on the board that the Patriots are at least thinking of drafting. What happens if Mayo is not as in love? Does Mayo acquiesce? Does he subjugate his ego? And does he say, I'm going to give Van Pelt the final say on this player because he's the offensive guy? Or in that moment, does Mayo say, I appreciate you, Alex, but I feel this guy isn't right for this team? Because to me, Mayo and DeMarcus Covington are going to be simpatico on a lot of this stuff. If they're looking at a defensive prospect, I believe Covington and Mayo will agree on the vast majority of those players, right? Offensively is the interesting part. Is there a push and pull there between the head coach and Alex Van Pelt? If so, is Elliot Wolf the guy who breaks the tie if there's a tie? Interesting stuff. Mark Daniels of Mass Live posted that Elliot Wolf said another team has not offered a bag for 3 just yet. Translation, pay up. If we're going to deal this pick, we want the bag. What you think the bag is, what you have offered so far, isn't good enough. And I'm telling the world that. We have not received the quote-unquote bag. So pay up or shut up. Projecting quarterbacks. Wolf said it's a long-term decision. We look at the upside, not just at the first pick, but every pick. And I can't stress this enough 6 days away from the draft. You are not drafting for the 2024 team in essence. You are drafting for the future of this team. It's not about 2024. It's not about what your record is going to be this year. It's about how do you position this franchise from 2025 to 2035? What does that 10-year period look like? When you are rebuilding an organization, when you are rebuilding a roster, and you're rebuilding an offense, you have to understand that not everybody that you bring in as part of this rebuild is going to hit right away. So you're drafting for next year, year after that, year after that. It is not drafting the player as much as it is drafting the prospect. You're drafting the projection. J.J. McCarthy could be a better quarterback in many's eyes right now than Drake May is. But that's not the question. The question that Elliot Wolf has to answer is who is going to be the better quarterback 3 years from now? That's the secret sauce. As far as the quarterback class, Wolf said there's a general idea of how they feel about these players. To me, they are finishing up the process, right? That tells us they have a general idea, a general feel. They're getting closer and closer to finalizing what they believe is their board. Does a quarterback have to be a pick or have to be the pick at number 3? Elliot Wolf said no. Some people lost their minds on this, I'm sure. Don't lose your mind. Why would Wolf tip his hand? Again, he is not in the business. When he's sitting in front of the media yesterday, Wolf is not in the business of being honest with us. If he says it doesn't have to be a quarterback at pick number 3, it doesn't mean he honestly believes that it doesn't have to be a quarterback at pick number 3. He certainly could believe that, yes, if we're staying at 3, that pick is going to be a freaking quarterback. But he's not going to go out there and tell everybody that. Why is he going to tip his hand? Part of the messaging yesterday from Wolf was to make sure that the "We're open" sign was hanging on the front door of the Patriots. They want to make sure everybody understands. They want to make sure everybody understands that they are open for business. Why? It's not because they necessarily want to trade the 3rd pick. It's because if somebody offers them a ridiculous offer, then they would take the offer. So you keep the "We're open" sign hanging on the front door until you make that pick on Thursday night. That's what you do. That's what you're supposed to do. Nobody knows. There could be 5 minutes left on the clock. Like, I would expect the Patriots to use every single solitary second of their allotted time at number 3 to wait to see if somebody gets truly desperate and calls in the final moments with a ridiculous offer. They should use every second of that time. And then if that team calls, if that deal is bananas, then you take the deal. Then you take the deal. If Minnesota calls in the last moments of that clock ticking down and they offer you 11, 23, a first-round pick next year, and Christian Darrisaw, I still think Justin Jefferson is a pipe dream. But if they offer you that, if they offer you a young left tackle to go along with 2 first-round picks, I'm not going to say 3 because 3 to 11 is a pick swap. Stop saying 3 first-round picks. Stop saying 3 first-round picks. So you get the 2 first-round picks. You swap 3 and 11. but you also get Darisaw. If that offer comes in, that's something to look at, because now you have your franchise left tackle. You've got 11 and 23. You've got a first next year. And the other part of this, too, we haven't spent a ton of time on it, but the other part of this, too, is what does Elliot Wolf believe when he's trying to project Minnesota next season? Does Wolf believe that Minnesota is going to be bad? If he thinks Minnesota is going to be bad, that 2025 first-round pick is even more valuable in his eyes. But this is the game you play. Phil Perry, friend of the program, he posted this. Wolf says he feels the quarterback available at number 3 would be worthy of the 3rd pick, and he said previously he'd be comfortable taking one of the top quarterbacks at number 3. Again, this could be how he honestly feels. This could be how, Elliot Wolf honestly feels about this draft class. He could look at this and say, hey, I'm happy with any of the top 3 guys, top 4 guys. Again, Wolf tried to sell these people that, he's into all of the quarterbacks. You could open it up. He said, I'm not believing that. I don't think Elliot Wolf is looking at the top 6 quarterbacks saying to himself, I would take any of those guys at 3. I think that's outrageous. I think that's why Michael Penix was a last-minute visit, as Bert said. It's because just in case you trade down, I don't think you take any quarterback at 3. That's outrageous. But he could certainly look at the idea of Drake May or Jaden Daniels and say, I'd be happy with either one. Doesn't mean you don't like one more than the other. We talked about this a little bit earlier this week in the podcast. If you have a similar grade on these guys, you could have Drake May just a tick above Daniels or Daniels just a tick above May. So inevitably, if both of them are on the board, then you take the guy who is just slightly ahead of the other one. But at the end of the day, if the overall grade is telling you that you should draft that guy at 3, that he's worthy of that pick at 3, then you take that guy at 3. So I think that's what we could be looking at here. And when Elliot Wolf says that he feels the quarterback available at 3 would be worthy of the 3rd pick, he's also building value in the pick. More on Wolf. We got C's, B's. This pod is jam-packed. But before we do that, don't forget to give us that thumbs up. Like the program. Like the YouTube channel. More likes means more eyeballs. You know the deal. Trying to expand the brand. Subscribe as well. If you're just joining us for the first time, you don't know what we do here. We are an alternative to a lot of the other things that are out there and available to you as content. If you enjoy that, then subscribe. The next goal is 3,500 subscriptions. It is a major, massive, massive goal. We get there step by step, liking, subscribing, rate, review. And again, the Patreon page loaded with draft content next week. And we're going to have a draft chat at that Patreon page as well. Right before the draft, we're going to have a draft chat. So here's what I want you guys to know and gals to know. Next week, loaded with draft content, Patreon, all sorts of exclusive pods with even more draft content for you on there. We'll also do on Thursday, what we're doing on Thursday, we will have our usual 11 a.m. podcast. We will do a draft preview podcast on this channel. Then I'm going to move over to the Patreon page, and we will have a chat leading right up to the draft. Then the draft starts. I walk away. I watch what happens. And then as soon as the Patriots make the pick at 3, or they make their decision, if it's a trade down, as soon as that happens, we are popping on to this YouTube channel, and we are going to do a live reaction podcast on what the Pats do in the draft. That is your draft day and night, loaded with content, one-man band. Like and subscribe. Here's more from Wolf. Being able to support the quarterback, and this got some people worked up. He said we have a solid offensive line. He mentioned Owenu, Andrews, talked about the 3 rookies that they're developing. He mentioned that they signed a core of 4. By the way, did you realize, that's the word I'm looking for, did you realize the name that Elliot Wolf did not bring up last night? Or yesterday? He talked about the offensive line. He mentioned Owenu. He mentioned David Andrews. He mentioned the 3 rookies from last year, James Andrews, Mafi, of course, and City So, and he mentioned Okorafor. Which offensive lineman did he not bring up? And does that mean anything? Interesting that he did not bring up the name of Cole Strange. Cole Strange wasn't mentioned. Every other offensive lineman was mentioned. Cole Strange was not. Again, could have been a mistake. Could have been an oopsie. I forgot to mention him. But it was very interesting to me that Cole Strange was not mentioned when Wolf was talking about the O-line. He said a solid foundation, a solid system in place with Coach Van Pelt. I definitely feel like we can support the quarterback. He was then asked, I think it was Karen Garigian with the great question asking, do you think people are underestimating the wide receivers and the offensive tackles? Wolf said, I do. We feel good about where we are. Through free agency on the offensive side in particular, we've been able to supplement our roster properly, so we're not having to draft for need as much. Part of this, and I thought Andrew Callahan of the Herald did a great job bringing this up. Part of this is Elliot Wolf publicly praising the locker room. He is speaking up for his guys. That's part of this. And that was something I did not necessarily think of yesterday when I was watching it. But, Andrew Callahan brought it up in the Herald. Talked to Andrew last night as well for a couple of minutes. He brought it up again last night to me. And it's a great point by Andrew. Part of this press conference is to throw flowers, throw the bouquet at your current players. Take care of them, so to speak. And so some of this is Wolf taking care of the current roster, speaking up for them. Now, Wolf kept saying we've got, NFL players. We've got NFL receivers, NFL offensive line, NFL running backs, and NFL tight ends. Yes, they have NFL players because those guys are currently in the NFL. The question is, how good are they? How good are they? I think all of us believe they need more. And I think Eliot Wolf believes they need more. Again, Eliot Wolf is not in the business of being honest. Not yesterday, especially. So when he goes out there and he says, I think we can support a young quarterback, what were you expecting him to say? Now, he could have said, oh, we could do more. But again, he's sending multiple messages here. He's standing by the locker room. He's standing by the current roster. He's giving his guys a boost, right? He's publicly giving his guys a boost. Meanwhile, he knows they need more. But if he goes out there and he says, yeah, you know what? We'd love to get a young tackle. The draft is a week away from yesterday. Why is he going to tip his hand? He's not going to tip his hand. If you took what Eliot Wolf said, if you took every word that he said as literal yesterday, I don't think you understand what he was doing. I don't think you understand what any GMs were doing yesterday. If you saw all of the comments that were sprayed around on X and Twitter and Instagram from all of these GMs that talked yesterday, you would know. It would be clear. This is misinformation. They're not in the business of telling you everything that is the truth. So does Eliot Wolf honestly believe? Did Eliot Wolf say, I think we're in great shape? No, he didn't. Eliot Wolf said we have NFL players. And I think that language means something. We have NFL players, as in we have players that are in the league. They do have NFL quality players. They don't have great players at wide receiver, right? They don't have any game-changing true alpha number ones, but KJ Osborne is an NFL receiver. He's a legitimate NFL receiver, as is Kendrick Bourne, as is Pop Douglas. If Juju was healthy, he would be the same way. So I don't think he's sitting there telling us that, oh, yeah, we can't get better, we can't get improved. As a matter of fact, if Eliot Wolf truly believed that they have enough to support the young quarterback and he was content, he's not going after Calvin Ridley. They're not making phone calls on A.J. Brown. Talk versus actions. especially this time of the year. Who's the left tackle? Wolf said if the season started tomorrow, he thinks it would be Okorafor. Said he played left tackle in college, went back and watched that film. He's an athletic big guy. Feels like that Okorafor can make that transition back to the left side. The draft will tell us how they truly feel, right? We'll see how they truly feel about their offensive line, how they truly feel about left tackle. I think they would love to have Okorafor more as a swing tackle. That's what his contract would dictate. I don't think Elliot Wolf saying, he said if the season started tomorrow, and he even made a joke that he makes fun of people who say that line, but if the season started tomorrow, he would think it's Okorafor. Doesn't mean he's telling you that, Okorafor is plan A. Much like when he says we have NFL players, he's not telling you that he believes they have very good NFL players or great NFL players. He's just telling you we have guys that can play in the positions. We have somebody. And I thought that was even more obvious when he was asked about an X receiver. We've talked about the Patriots needing that true X receiver on the outside. And I thought a lot of people are talking about the first comment. A lot of people are talking about how he said they have NFL players and that they have the players that can support a quarterback. But they're leaving out the other answer that I thought, as a follow-up, told us what Eliot Wolf was truly saying during that press conference, right? He said we have NFL players, we have NFL receivers. And when he was asked about the X role, he really described what he was talking about during that prior answer, because he said, I think we have players that can line up and play X. They do. KJ Osborne can line up as the X receiver. Is he the X receiver that you want? No. He's not the bona fide true alpha number one, but he has played snaps at the X, i.e., KJ Osborne is an NFL player. We have NFL receivers. Osborne can play the X. He's an NFL guy, right? But he said, do we have players? When he said we have players that can line up and play X, he followed that and said, do we have players that on a 3-by-1 beat the backside coverage every single time? I'm not sure we have that just yet. So when he's talking about players, because I know some of the football lingo can catch some of you off guard, when he talks about having players that can beat backside coverage when you go 3-by-1, which is 3 receivers on one side, 1 alpha dude on the other, can that 1 dude on the other side of the formation beat that backside coverage consistently? Wolf told us we don't have that guy. So when you put all of it together, yes, we have NFL players. We have NFL receivers. We have somebody that we can put in that X position, somebody like KJ Osborne. But do we have that alpha male that can be on that side with the 3-by-1 to beat the coverage every time? No, we don't have that guy. So I really don't understand why people were getting all, their underwear in a bunch. I don't get it. He told us we don't have that alpha X. We've got somebody that we can put in there. We can plug the hole with somebody, but we don't have the dude. And that's why you call on A.J. Brown. That's why you put $40 million guaranteed on the table for Calvin Ridley. That's why you make calls on T. Higgins. And I would imagine Brandon Ayuk. But people are missing that second part, which was the most important part. It wasn't when he said, NFL players. You want to know why? Because the first part's the low-hanging fruit. You can get all worked up about, Elliot Wolf thinks that he has a roster that can win. He thinks he's got it all figured out on offense. They don't need more help. They don't need more time. He didn't say any of that. He didn't say any of that. He said we have NFL players. To me, i.e., guys that can plug the hole if you need them to plug the hole. But he knows that he needs a better left tackle than Chuck Okorafor, and he might not get that guy, this year right now, which would be a mistake. But he knows that Okorafor is not the future. They gave him a 1-year deal on limited money. Maybe he believes that Okorafor has some potential. He can grow into that. But again, do not buy into the words that he is saying as, the honest truth. But when he does come out and say, we don't have that, buy that, because that's honesty. When he says we don't have somebody on the 3x1 that can beat that backside coverage consistently, believe in that answer, because he's admitting we don't have the alpha on the outside. That was the translation. That's what he told us. And the other part that people are missing is that Elliot Wolf also said yesterday that they would be open to a trade. And they would be open to a trade for a wide receiver. He said that they have had conversations about multiple positions, not just wide receiver. So he told us yesterday they've been on the phone. You're not on the phone having conversations about wide receivers if you're happy, if you're content with your current wide receivers. Right? Sometimes we just have to look at this logically. That's what I try to do. All right. Let's slide in some Celtics and Bruins. First, Celtics. Game 1, 1 p.m., Sunday, the tip-off. Celtics have been incredibly consistent. They have been very consistent all year long. And some people got wrapped up into the New York and Milwaukee losses late in the season. Don't get wrapped up in those losses. Do not get wrapped up in those losses. Oh, no, they're not taking it seriously at the end of the season. Let me enlighten you about how the end of seasons have gone for prior NBA champions, okay? The Celtics ended this regular season, their final 20 games. The Celtics had a record of 16-4 over their final 20 games. Do you know what the Nuggets record was last year before they got into the postseason over their final 20 games? I want you all to guess. What do you think the Nuggets record was in the final 20 games of the regular season last year? Throw your guesses in the comment section. The Celtics finished the year 16-4 in their final 20. What do you think the Nuggets record was in their final 20 games last year before they went out and won the chip? I can tell you that the Warriors team that beat the Celtics in the finals a couple years ago, they went 10-10 over their final 20 games. They went 4-4 with Steph Curry. Nolan Fletcher guesses, he says 12-8. He says the Nuggets were 12-8 in their final 20 games. Keep sending those guesses. The Bucks in 2021 were 14-6, so they played pretty well. Again, the Celtics were 16-4. The COVID Lakers in the bubble, 3-5 during the seeding games. The Raptors, 2018-2019, they were 13-7 in their final 20 games. The Warriors in 2017-2018 were 10-10 over the final 20 games. So when you look at this, 3 of the prior 6 NBA champions went 10-10 over their final 20 regular season games. And that includes last year's Nuggets. Last year's Nuggets, the Warriors the year before that, John Johnson jumped in with 11-9. I gave up the answer, John. It's 10-10. So last year, the Nuggets, 500 over their final 20 games of the regular season. The year before that, the Warriors, 500 over the final 20 games of their regular season. The Warriors again in 2017-2018, 500 over the final 20 regular season games. So if people are losing their minds over a couple of losses to Milwaukee and New York, when the Celtics had the playoffs wrapped up a month before then, and the number 1 seed wrapped up weeks before then, I would say you are overreacting to a couple of games. Because championship level teams have played worse. The Celtics finished off the regular season better than any of the prior 6 champions. So don't overreact. I think the Celtics are really motivated. Recent history, everybody talking about how they've lost this series and that series, and they've choked this away and choked that away. That should be motivation. The reputation of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum in big games, that should be motivation. Joe Mazzulla, people saying that he can't coach, that should be motivation. The Cleveland Cavaliers tanking the fourth quarter to be the fourth seed in the final regular season game of their year. That should be motivation. Shaquille O'Neal saying that they're overrated. That should be motivation. And if you're worried about who they're going to play, I don't know why you're worried about that. If they are who we think they are, if they are who they've been in this regular season, if they are that team, they should beat pretty much every other team in the NBA in a 7-game series. The Nuggets are the only team to me that should be of major concern. If they lose to any other team in this postseason, it's inexcusable to me. The Nuggets, I could understand. Every other team, not so much. There are 28 teams in the NBA that the Celtics should be favored to beat in a 7-game series. And they might even be favored to beat the Nuggets in a 7-game series. So people were worried about Philly or Miami. Who cares? Beat them. And now, of course, we know Jimmy Butler's going to be out for a little bit. Alex Caruso is out probably for the Bulls. Just win. Let's talk about Tatum for a minute. His reputation versus the reality. A lot of people think that Jason Tatum is a choke artist, that he's not clutch. How about this? Clutch shot efficiency the last 3 postseasons. Now, this is the last 3 postseasons, players' effective field goal percentage in clutch situations, which is the last 5 minutes, game within 5, a minimum of 20 field goal attempts. So, again, the last 3 postseasons, a player's effective field goal percentage in the last 5 minutes of a game within 5. Did you know Jason Tatum is number 1 on that list? Jason Tatum has the best effective field goal percentage in clutch situations over the past 3 postseasons. His effective field goal percentage has been 57.4%. Klay Thompson is second at 57.1. Steph Curry is third at 55.3. Giannis is fourth at 54.3. And Nikola Jokic is fifth at 49%. Now, to be fair, Tatum's taken less shots than Curry, Giannis, and Jokic. But his effective field goal percentage in clutch moments over the last 3 postseasons is the best in the NBA. And he has also been much, much improved with his pull-up jump shot and his pull-up 3. And I have been on that over the last few years. If Tatum is making those pull-up jump shots and pull-up 3s, he's almost impossible to stop. And he's been shooting those 3s and shooting those pull-up jumpers at a much higher clip over the last 40, 45 games. Dangerous. Don't forget to give us that like. Don't forget to subscribe. Porzingis versus the zone should be a difference maker. Drew Holiday, less usage. If you look at Drew Holiday and his usage at Milwaukee, he has historically not been a very good postseason player. Hopefully he's better with less usage. Jaylen Brown, I think, is better than he's ever been. Derek White is as good as he's ever been. Here are the big questions for the Celtics for me. Porzingis, he didn't have a great playoffs with the Dallas Mavericks. Some would tell you, including J.J. Redick, that was the game plan, and Redick was on that team. The game plan was to pretty much stash Porzingis in the corner. But Porzingis, not great in the playoffs. So will he be able to flip the switch, so to speak, in this postseason and be the guy he was in the regular season? It's a question. Until we see it, and until we see it consistently, it's a question. How will he rebound the basketball against physicality? Will he suffer from wear and tear, having to come back every night, right? He sat a lot of nights this year. They took care of him. They were conservative. Is he going to be able to give them the full lot of games in this playoffs? The late offense, another question in tight games. Will they rely on isolation, or will we see more ball movement, man movement? I hope it's the latter. Will they show urgency, setting up some of those final possessions in tight games? Or will they continue to walk the ball up, which drives me nuts? They waste time. Show urgency, especially Tatum. And some other things, they have to be much better in defensive rebounding. They have been deplorable defensive rebounding wise over the past, I don't know, couple of months. They have to be better rebounding the ball in offensive rebounds to the opposition. Stop with the second chance points. Stop it. Defensive rebounding. Don't get sloppy. Some careless turnovers. Don't do it. In playoff games, those are huge. And if you're not knocking down your threes early on, switch it up a little bit, touch the paint more, and then go back to the three. Those are my Celtics thoughts. Bruins thoughts. Toronto is the much better draw. We know that. Much better draw. Wanted the Maple Leafs. We know the Maple Leafs and their history of choking. And the Bees have absolutely had Toronto's number. This season, 4-0. They swept Toronto. They outscored Toronto 2-1 this year in the regular season. We look at the power play. Power play has been an issue for the Bees, right? This week, Coach Montgomery switched some things up, trying to give some life to that power play. It's been bad. Against Toronto's PK, the Bruins, 30% power play. Outrageous. And the save percentage has been almost .950 this year against Toronto. The Bruins have won 6, count them, 6 straight playoff series against the Maple Leafs. The Maple Leafs have to prove that they can get that Bruins monkey off their back. The Bruins have had their number. Joe Haggerty this week. Swayman versus the Maple Leafs this year. 3-0-0. A 1.30 goals against average. Almost a .960 save percentage, which leads me to question, will you go with the goalie rotation? Are you going to go with this goalie rotation like you've talked about? It looks like you'll start Swayman, right? Looks like Swayman should get the start tomorrow night. Game 1, 8 p.m. tomorrow night. Swayman should be between the pipes tomorrow night. If Swayman goes out there and shuts down Toronto, and you're talking about your goalie going 4-0 this year against this specific team and being lights out, how do you go away from Swayman on Monday night to Allmark? How do you make that change? I would not, and I hope they don't. I understand the regular season stuff and what these goalies are used to, blah. Swayman has been nails against the Maple Leafs. If he's great tomorrow night, there's no way in hell that I would take Swayman out of the game for game 2 and throw Allmark in. There's no chance. I would play Swayman again in game 2. And if he plays great, guess what? He gets game 3. If he pukes on himself, then I'm going to Allmark. But if Swayman is playing great tomorrow night after shutting down the Maple Leafs and you go up 1-0, you have the opportunity to go up 2-0, take care of home ice, and move forward. I would hate the idea of throwing Allmark in if Swayman's great tomorrow. I would hate it. Some keys. Charlie McAvoy, big series for him, right? Has not necessarily stepped up in the playoffs scoring-wise. He's going to be needed to slow down Austin Matthews. Matthews, terrific, right? Like 70 goals this year. McAvoy versus Matthews, a huge matchup. Carlo versus Nylander, huge matchup. Carlo, supposed to be healthy, should be out there tomorrow night. That's another big matchup. Carlo and McAvoy have to show up consistently in this series. They have to be good. They have to be good. The defensive pairings, by the way, you can't allow guys to consistently get behind you. Do not allow it. Play responsible hockey. All 3 zones, be responsible, especially in your own zone. So McAvoy and Carlo, huge in this series. Can the power play, as I mentioned, can the power play get going? Efficient puck movement. Tape to tape. No lazy passes like we saw from Pasta the other night. Just lazy pass across the ice. Awful turnover in the neutral zone. You have to take care of the puck. You got to move the puck. You got to shoot the damn puck. Can the power play get going in this series? As I mentioned, they've been fantastic. They've been fantastic in the power play against this specific PK. Can they continue that? And that leads you into whether or not this team can score enough. Can the Bruins score enough? Marchand has 3 goals. He had 3 goals in his final 22 games. Marshy's got to get going. Can you rely on Freddie and Heinen to be as good as they were during this regular season? And guys like Geeky, are you going to get production from Freddie, Heinen, Geeky? Are those guys going to show up? The postseason is a different animal. And to prove that, Pavel Zacha. Zacha has as many goals in his postseason career as I have goals in my postseason career. And here's a little bit of a spoiler. I don't have an NHL postseason career. Zacha has 0 goals in his 12 playoff games. Charlie Coyle, meanwhile, his playoff history, he's played a bunch of games. His plus-minus is a minus 29. It's going to be big for these other Bruins to step up. Right? Big. Freddie, Heinen, Geeky, Zacha, Coyle. Those 5 guys have to step up. But it starts with the big boys. Pasta can't have costly turnovers and lazy shifts. He's mostly been good. I think a lot of the stuff that's been said about Pasta over the last month or two has been hyperbole. Shocker. I think Pasta's mostly been good, played 200 feet. I think he's mostly been good. He's got to be at his best. McAvoy has to be at his best. Hampus Lindholm, what is he going to look like? Can he get it going consistently night in and night out? And Marchand, again, 3 goals last 22 games. You need Marchand to be a scoring presence in this series. So that'll do it. Who thinks I could just talk football? I could talk all 4, baby. I could talk all 4 all day long. I appreciate every single one of you. Don't forget to like this channel if you enjoy the content that we deliver, which is just an alternate. Just an alternate. Alternative is the word. I've gone about an hour and 7 minutes, folks, straight without a break. The alternative of everything else going out there. If you enjoy what we do, don't forget to give us that thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Rate and review, Spotify, Apple Pods. We went over an hour today, but you got the weekend to listen, right? Some good quality playoff preview stuff before those games happen. Some more draft stuff. And next week, it's going to be bananas. Next week, Draft Central. On this podcast, at the Patreon, it's going to be a big week. Enjoy your Friday. Enjoy the beverages that you choose to drink this weekend. Be responsible, be safe, be well. We're back on Monday unless something big breaks over the weekend. We'll be here on Monday at 11 a.m. Appreciate every single one of you and your support. Until next time, this has been The Nick Cattle Show.